I'll just do a quick hello and welcome everybody to the virtual session for VCERT, Prepare to Teach Year 1, and this is specifically for child development and care in the early years. Beth, if you can move on to the introduction slide, we're not moving yet from the first one.
It's moved, hang on, it's frozen. It's moved
Typical.
on
This
for
is
me, yeah.
Virtual training, but it's not moving for us. We've still got the session will begin shortly. Slide. Can anybody else see the session slides moving, or is it just myself?
I could see the introduction. I could see them.
Yeah, it's on contents.
Oh, right.
Is it on the pictures?
It's gone back to introductions.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the slide we need to be on.
Brilliant. Mine's just not moving, so I'm just going to assume that the slides are moving. So before we dive in, let's start with a couple of quick introductions. So I'm Helen Scanlon, I'm the Provider Development Manager, and I support the Provider Development Officers to work with providers, in particularly schools in this context, across the country with ongoing VCERTs, onboarding, training and CPD. So we're joined today by Janet King, and I'm going to pause a second and let Janet say hello.
Thanks, Helen. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our session. So my name is Janet King. I'm the Sector Manager for Education and Childcare, all things early years and education at NCFE. So nice to be here. Thanks, Helen.
Thank you, Janet. And we're both at opposite ends of the country, aren't we?
We are.
We've also got Beth here. Beth is one of our officers who helps with VCERTs and supports providers. So she's doing all the technical stuff for this afternoon. She's keeping an eye on the chat and posting things in it for us, and of course moving the slides on. So we're going to move on to the contents page. So getting into the nitty-gritty of today's session then, we're going to provide a brief overview of the VCERT Technical Award in Child Development in Early Years. We're going to cover the qualification structure and assessment. We're going to explore curriculum planning and formative assessment, where you'll have the opportunity to look at your pupils' knowledge journey and create a roadmap that will help you to better understand how and when to teach the indicative content, as well as develop some formative assessment activities. We're going to share a summary of all the resources and the support that's available from NCFE to support you and your pupils, before giving you the opportunity to create some teaching and learning activities of your own that can help deliver the content in an active and engaging way. And as a group, we'll also learn from one another and share best practice on what you currently use in your classroom. Lastly, there's going to be an opportunity to ask us questions that you may have about the qualification. We're aware that our quality assurance team have recently postponed sessions which cover how the Model 5 VCERTs are assessed. The rearranged dates for these are now available, and we're going to post the link in the chat now. Please be aware that we are not part of that training, so we will be unable to answer any specific questions about the assessment regulations. The rearranged dates are before the end of this academic year, well before you'll need the information about the assessments in Year 2. And if you can't make the dates though at the end of this year, there's also some dates in September as well. So Beth will pop the link into the chat, and Janet has also said, please pop any questions in as we go. So we're going to start off with a starter activity. We'd like to do a quick poll on how confident you currently feel with the delivery, assessment and quality assurance of this VCERT qualification. So with 1 being low and 10 being high, where would you put yourself on that scale? Just so you know, the names of who puts what isn't recorded, so please feel free to say exactly where you're at. We expect people to be at a range of readiness stages as we enter the end of this academic year to prepare for next. So we'll just give it a little bit longer to make sure everyone's had the chance to put their vote in. We do have a range there. Beth, can you share the results, or do I just do it verbally?
We have 1 to 2 at 17%, 5 to 6 at 67%, 7 to 8 at 17%.
Brilliant. So we've got some newbies and some a bit more confident. Brilliant. Thank you. as I say, that's where we'll expect you to be, that you'll be in different stages in relation to your confidence levels. And we do hope that by the end of today's session, you're going to feel more knowledgeable and confident about the delivery, assessment and quality assurance of this qualification. So we're going to start on the first activity, and we call this our KWL activity. K being related to what you already know, W, what you want to learn from the session, and then L would be, after the session, what did you learn? What have I learned? So this is in the participant handbook. If you've not already completed the first two boxes, please take the opportunity to spend a little bit of time doing so now. Or if you've got a blank piece of paper, just note down what you already know and what you'd like to know in today's session. We'll give you a minute or two to sort of record your thoughts, and if you can, pop something in the chat box as well, just to say what you'd like to know or what you already know, just so that we can differentiate this session as much as we possibly can. And we've already used a term, haven't we, the NEA and the summative assessment. So yes, everyone wants to know how to assess the NEA. Thank you for that, Melanie. And I'm just going to pause a second again, because we've just been joined by another one of our subject matter experts, Stacey Mann. Good afternoon, Stacey. How are you doing?
Good afternoon, everyone.
You've come to spend some quality time with child development early years teachers, haven't you?
I have. I almost said good afternoon, Mrs. Scanlon.
Hello, Stacey. I'm so pleased you're here. So we've just asked people to say what they already know about the VCERT in child development early years and what they'd like to learn this afternoon. So we've got some of the answers coming into the chat now. I'm not a child development early years specialist, so as we go through this afternoon's session, we'll hopefully answer some of those questions. I'm going to rely on my lovely colleagues, Janet and Stacey. Before I move on, is there anything in the chat there, Janet or Stacey, that we could pick up on straight away?
Hi, just looking through the chat there. I'm looking at really, oh, it's moving around. The content 5, so we can have a look at that. I can take a look at that while the session is taking place, and also just about how to arrange that the whole content over the teaching program. It might be interesting actually to hear from people and to network on that and to see how people are delivering the qualification, and how I think it depends on timetables, accessibility and all these sorts of things, but it'll be interesting for people to put in the chat how they deliver it and how they sort of bring their timetables together, how often they do that. People are also talking about adapting workbooks as well. Thinking there that must be, you know, for individual student need, what to teach in each area, how to prepare for assessments. These are the general questions that are coming through at the moment, Helen.
Excellent, thank you. And yes, the workbooks are really good, but of course they were written for a generic learner, generic pupil, not your specific students. So, and we absolutely would encourage you to adapt the workbooks to meet the needs of your own pupils, definitely. Okay, let's move on then. We'll start off with a qualification overview. So we're going to start with just a brief overview of the technical award qualification. And the slide I'm going to show you next, or Beth's going to show you next, has the basic qualification structure on it. So the GLH in total are 136, and this includes 120 hours for delivery, 14 hours for the NEA, and 1 hour 30 minutes for the EA, so the non-examined assessment and the examined assessment. The total qualification time, or TQT, is 150 hours, and this includes homework you might set and/or any independent learning your pupils do. So the NEA has a 50% weighting and the EA has a 50% weighting, so they make up the whole qualification. The content assessed in the EA and NEA will be sampled from across the full breadth of the qualification, and this overall qualification grades go from a level 1 pass up to a distinction, and then for a level 2 a pass up to a distinction star. And just a reminder to turn microphones off just to minimize the background noise. So next I'd like to explore some curriculum planning in a bit more detail. and ask you to start considering what your learner journey is going to look like and why it's going to look like the way it is. So when you're curriculum planning, when you're considering your planning, this quote on the screen now from Dylan William really resonates with us, and we often refer to it when considering curriculum design and teaching and learning sequencing. The delivery of the what you need to teach from the qual spec does not need to be, nor was it the intent to be, delivered in a linear fashion. Spaced practice or distributed practice, sorry, which Dylan refers to, means spacing retrieval and recall of knowledge out over a period of time rather than crammed practice. So regularly revisiting prior learned material. And this is an important part of an effectively planned curriculum, providing opportunity for pupils to forget and relearn. This supports the transfer of knowledge into the long-term memory. Janet, is there anything in particular to childcare and early years that you could bring into Dylan Williams's theory here?
I think, and certainly people experienced on the call today, I think it's about always approaching things through that sort of child-centered lens, thinking about holistic opportunities, thinking about how all these content areas overlap, how they are integral to each other, and how, you know, ultimately they are going to follow that child-centered pedagogy. So I think we're learning things in a sort of content areas from 1 to 9, but actually we are able to see those links and how pupils begin to make sense of all of those things with the more knowledge that they sort of assimilate and accommodate. So I would say very much that this is something that allows for that overlap of knowledge, that holistic approach through the teaching and learning. And as you get more familiar with the content areas, this will be something that naturally happens.
Absolutely,
Helen.
thank you. Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Janet. We're going to move on to looking at curriculum planning in a bit more detail now. I'm going to start asking you guys for some input. So considering the content areas, let's explore for a moment a blocked approach versus an interleaving approach and how spaced learning and retrieval can support the delivery of the new model Cert. So blocked study, which involves studying a topic before moving on to another, may have suited previous Cert models, which featured end-of-unit assessments. However, the information isn't being transferred to long-term memory, which needs to be the primary focus now. With the new Model 5 Cert, such that students no longer do end-of-unit assessments, the ability to retain and recall large pieces of information has become even more important, and the science of learning evidences that interleaving in the most effective strategy. The most effective strategy. So the example you can see on the screen now explores how the content can be mapped using a blocked approach compared to an interleaved approach. In the chat, can you let us know which approach you think you were planning or you might plan to use? Were you planning to teach a content area one by one, or have you explored the content and made naturally occurring links across the content areas? I want to talk about interleaving. It refers to mixing up the subjects or topics, or in the case of Cert, the content areas, instead of blocking them together. Stacey, I'm going to bring you in and say, what are your, oh, sorry, Janet, has Stacey left us, or she's still with us?
I think Stacey's having some technical issues, and she's certainly trying to get back on. She has been in touch with me to say she's trying to get back on.
Right.
But in terms of, I'm happy to take that question in terms of like thinking. It's something you said actually that's making me really reflect on. That's the importance of consolidation. And when we think about the previous model for those teachers on the call today who may have been involved in the previous tech award in child development and care, for example, where it was, you know, unit 1, unit 2, and then do the revision for the exam. What we've got here is that sort of bringing all of that knowledge together and then applying it. And I can see in the chat that people are talking about block study, natural links to other content areas. So always maybe when we're doing some of that formative assessment, when we're preparing for the inevitable and the assessment, we're actually bringing together those content areas through case studies, through scenarios, through sample NEAs. Anything that we do is actually not just focusing on one particular aspect, but is bringing together that consolidation and application of knowledge. And that really is working towards that full appreciation of level 2 study.
Have a look at the learner journey and how it can help students make those connections that lead to the benefits of those transfer of learned skills, sort of thing. So in the chat box, what we're going to do is ask you to discuss the importance of each image in relation to curriculum planning. So the process of curriculum sequencing is about mapping out the skills and knowledge and content areas across the school curriculum so that what the learners learn builds on what they've learned before. Sequencing the learning properly provides a smooth, incrementally progressive learning journey where each small step allows the learner to be successful in a continuous way. And I think the most important thing with technical and vocational learning is that these theories are not just taught in isolation. It's about developing your learners' understanding to apply that theory that they learn in knowledge, applying it to practice. So some questions here for consideration. The probably most important one from a quality assurance and Ofsted perspective would be how aware your learners are of the results of the formative assessment activities that you're carrying out with them during the sessions. We've added some specific areas, talking about what knowledge they're learning, how they're sequencing the development of that knowledge, the themes that they're learning and what links together, the skills that they need to apply, the behaviours that they'll need to change and adapt and develop, and then those English, maths, digital skills, work skills, communication and problem solving, thinking about that holistic learner and how you're going to think about the needs of your pupils as you're developing your curriculum. What aspects of that really pounce out, jump out in your mind in relation to, do your learners know that they need these? Are they aware that they need them? And how are you going to keep developing them throughout the curriculum using the different areas? Yes, Janet said we'll reach out for a definitive answer from the workbooks. Janet, I mean, this is nothing new in education. Does this apply for 14 to 16? How does this apply to 14 and 16-year-olds?
I think it's becomes a sort of more natural process as you get more experience, as you get more experience in your study. I think it's something where you begin to, you're assimilating all of that knowledge and you bring it forward and you apply that new knowledge into different situations and grow from that. The scaffolding is nothing new.
Yeah.
However, I think, listening to Samilia before and thinking about some of the things that have been put in the chat, it is difficult. This is a journey, just say learn a journey, and it definitely is something that comes with experience of study. So gaining that knowledge and almost knowing what that knowledge is in categories, in boxes, and then we begin to put things together and make those connections. I mean, that's a lovely example and a lovely image with the themes there. We begin to make those connections and apply that knowledge and then use it to be able to problem solve and in new situations and so on. And that can then change us. So I do think it can apply to younger learners. I just think younger learners at 14 are making those connections. So it's an exciting beginning of that journey, but it's the beginning of that. So a lot of people will be gaining that knowledge almost in sort of bite-sized chunks, and then the ability to be able to sequence and to take a thematic approach. I think that's where we're looking at individual pupils really, and how the stages of the journey become very clear, and that cuts across all aspects of teaching and learning, and you'll see that in all areas of GCSE study, won't you?
Absolutely, yes. Thank you, Janet. If we're going to move on now to the content areas, I'm going to bring Stacey back in to see how she feels these different content areas interleave and can be used, making those links and making those interleaving those sequences, if you like. Stacey, which areas here leap out at you that would go together naturally? Hoping that Stacey's technical issues have gone. Or Stacey's typing. Okie dokie. She can't get the audio at the moment. Janet, I'll come to you instead.
Yeah, let me jump in. So I mean, straight away there you've got the areas 1 and 2 where you're looking at child development and you're looking at that typical, and then you begin to think about the atypical and the factors that are influencing the child's development. And that then really they sort of all overlap, and you can give examples of how play and activities can influence the child's development. You're looking at good quality early years provision. So it's almost sort of looking at these content areas and maybe, I don't know, even colour coding or thinking about which aspects you might teach together or which aspects you might consolidate for revision together, and to try and bring those themes together. I love that little diagram. So I'm thinking about how we tie those knots, how we bring those connections together across this. I know somebody asked earlier in the chat about content area 5. It's a good idea now that we can all see those content areas together, that sort of legislation, policy and procedure, and it's always one that can be a little bit daunting, almost appears a little bit dry to teach. And I would think, if you're looking at that as your umbrella and you're thinking, okay, what are the policies? What is the role and the expectations of the early years practitioner? Why do we have legislation in place? And you make the connections between those policies and procedures that are coming and being anchored from a piece of legislation, and literally make those connections with the policies and how they all overlap. To try and make sense of legislation, policy and procedure can be a little bit daunting for anybody. So I would keep that as a sort of overarching content area.
Absolutely.
And
I'm just
keep coming back to it. Sorry, Helen.
No, I was just going to read what Stacey's sharing in the chat at the moment. So as she quite rightly said, someone's already mentioned the content areas 6 and 7 marry together nicely, and there can be a nice induction into the context, the subject area, and then content areas 8 and 9 also complement each other. Observation and what impacts on the planning process, whether that be in the moment planning or otherwise. But yes, as Joe points out, students don't do placement or work experience, so it's making those links to practice without actually being in practice, which would be the next challenge. But saying that, there are many ways you can bring practice into the classroom, especially with the resources we've got online now for showing an aspect of early years. Janet, is that? Oh, Janet's typing as well now. So
I was typing because I didn't want to interrupt, but I was going to say, I'll interrupt now then, so sorry. It was about applying the knowledge through case studies, through scenarios that bring all of that learning together. Would be a really good thing to do. And maybe looking at little video clips and things like that that is showing us what a 2-year-old looks and feels like, and what sorts of activities and experiences might be useful for children of this age in relation to curriculum development and so on. So yeah, I'd say case studies and scenarios would be really good where students are not going into work placement, to try and make sense of the learning that they're doing.
And how it applies to practice, yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll look now at another a delivery model example. And here's a visual structure of the new VCerts. And this slide was covered in more depth in part 1 of the Prep to Teach sessions. So if you were unable to attend those, they are available on our YouTube VCert playlist. You can see the key points in the year for the NEA and the EA. Year 1 is all about teaching the content. And then year 2 was reinforcing that content while the students complete the NEA and the EA. But interleaving these content areas then, This is based on the idea of a learning journey that embeds knowledge and skills through sequencing the curriculum. We've already talked about this. Pupils are required to combine elements of their learning and show accumulated knowledge and understanding across the qual content. And then synoptic assessment enables the pupils to evidence their capability to integrate and apply the knowledge and understanding and skills gained with a breadth and depth in the context. So it's therefore essential when planning for teaching and learning throughout the delivery that the interdependencies and links built across the content of the qual are highlighted and reinforced. The teaching content, as we said, does not have to be delivered in a linear fashion. Content areas are independent in knowledge, skills and concepts. But then teachers can take that synoptic approach across the qual. That should enable pupils to apply the theories and concepts from across the qual spec in context to skills-based situations, and through combining content and developing holistic connections, pupils will be able to demonstrate and evidence their full knowledge and understanding of the subject area and, of course, the early years sector. We're going to move on to have a look at an overview of the task. So this slide shows a summary of the NEA for child development in early years, including the marks to be awarded for each section. And I think the key point to note here is that when you're considering the learner journey and sequencing the curriculum, the content areas need to be continually linked to the NEA and the tasks. It's also worth considering how your learner journey also links to the external assessments too. And so, getting our thinking hats on, for this activity, I'd like you to think about how you would sequence the content and why. So consider if you need to teach a content area in its entirety before moving on, which areas of the indicative content link together. We've already talked about some of those. Are there common themes? Can you link forward and link back? How can you embed the knowledge and how can you embed the skills? Now we'll have a Jamboard activity that we could do this together. It's on page 3 in the workbook if you're working through that. You can start to create your own learner journey or your own learner knowledge roadmap, or review what you might have already produced whilst thinking about considerations that we've been talking about so far. So do feel free to share your completed knowledge roadmaps on page 2 of the Jamboard. You can also use your workbooks from page 3. So the link to the Jamboard should be in the chat. If you've not used Jamboard before, the control panel on the left-hand side that Beth's currently got the cursor on, if you click on that little sticky note, it gives you that sticky note. You can type away on that one, which ones you think you would sequence or put together, or any ideas that you have in relation to how you could sequence it in a way that's going to help your learners make sense and make those links, but also reinforce and retain. Retain's another important word from the Ofsted systems we have now. Retaining that information long term is more important than learning it and then moving on to the next unit, for example. So how could you and how do you sequence the content so that you can make those links and make it easier for the pupils to make the links themselves to the knowledge, skills and behaviours that they're going to need across all the content areas? Janet, have you had any further thoughts on the content areas connections?
I'm just listening, reading through what people are saying in the chat, and there is this sort of growing awareness that perhaps students, our pupils are not getting through the amount of information. So I think maybe having that holistic approach moving forward is going to be the answer. So looking where things can overlap, looking at sort of, you're not compromising on the teaching, you're not compromising on that quality of interaction, you're bringing together learnings and making sense. So I'd be going through the content areas, and I'd be sort of, because I like the colour coding, and I'd be colour coding what might live in one content area or topic, and make my own little topics from the content areas that are left if I needed to, and then bringing those together in the teaching so that you're covering that syllabus, but you're doing it in such a way that is efficient with the time that you have. For that sort of end, that summative synoptic assessment. So I think not to not to be afraid to do that and to unpick the syllabus and to unpick the content areas and pull them together. You're not compromising quality, you're not compromising anything. In fact, you're enhancing that consolidation and application of knowledge. That would be my sort of reaction and response if I was finding that I might be running out of time because of all the disruptions that the pupils have experienced this term.
Yes, excellent. Thank you, Janet. I've just noticed someone's put expectations and legislation connections. You've got two very different content areas there that could. What is the legislation saying? What are the expectations of whoever?
Exactly. I think that's a really, really good example where you may be looking at job descriptions, you might be looking at what an early years practitioner has to do, and then thinking, why do they do that? And sort of making that overlap. So you're exploring the role, but you're also covering that policy procedure. We do this because.
Yeah.
So yeah, great example.
And that one that says 6 and 7 together with input on 5, absolutely. That's what we've just been talking about there, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other of those sticky notes that you could pull out gems from? Sorry, just looking at the content areas, surely planning and the factors that influence child's development and 1, 2, and 9, could they go together? Child development, factors that influence a child's development, and planning in early years childcare.
Absolutely, and I think making the use. I can't help but jump in on some of these wonderful ideas. But Shazia, absolutely using those PowerPoints and maybe sort of using them discreetly where you're looking at a content area, but then maybe taking aspects and creating something that uses multiple PowerPoints, if you like, and sharing that holistically. I think it's having that mindset to be flexible and agile in relation to your cohort and your cohort's needs and applying them in that way. But some really good examples here. Really good.
Brilliant. And we're using a Jamboard so that you've got access to this afterwards. So everybody who has this link has all of this together. You've got the content areas there and you've got people's ideas. So please feel free to keep using this after today's session to share ideas and support each other as well. I'll give another minute or two to right. Yeah, we'll just give another minute or two in case any other little gems are coming in here. So it's a good question just while we're waiting there. Janet, do you know anything about the NEA tasks? Will they always be based on the topics in the example we've shared today?
They'll always be based around the syllabus and the content areas, so within those topics. So that gives you an indication of sort of that content build. So I don't get involved with the assessments, but I think it would have to be something that would tie in a summative and synoptic approach to the content areas. It may lend itself to a bias in a particular area, but it's going to be part and parcel and integral to the syllabus. So yes.
Brilliant. Okay, we'll move on then. As you know, we've got that Jamboard open. We will be coming back to it, and people are putting some great things on it. So we're just going to pause here a little second. It's a good opportunity now to take a look at your plan, do, review template that you've got in your workbook. So something you can use for yourself, but also something you use with your pupils. You could take a few moments to consider what you've already done, what you'll do today, next week, and by September, for example, and you can complete your plan, do, review in your workbook on page 5. So that's if you're using the workbook alongside today's session. So what do you already have done? Today you will, next week you will, and by September you will. It's also an idea you could use with your pupils as well. You could get them to do a plan, do, review sort of process as well. So let's move on to activity 2. What we're going to do from now on is try and do the activities that you tell us that you feel you could get the most benefit from. So if needs be, we can spend some time on this, or we can sort of just talk about it and then move on. So activity 2 is about active teaching. And for this activity, we'd like you all to think about the teaching and learning activities or tasks that can enable you to teach the content area in an active way to your pupils. So using the Jamboard again on page 3, use the sticky notes to record your answers in the different content areas. And some examples for child development early years. For example, the learner may benefit from listening to a health visitor discuss how they monitor a child's development. Additionally, practitioners may be contacted through a variety of methods and speak to learners via Google Hangout, Microsoft Teams, or other online platforms if a visit isn't permitted. For example, an external visit such as local early years provision, where practitioners can discuss their settings and provision, or a whole class discussion to identify the possible roles when working in an early years setting. It may be useful for learners to think about the job titles when considering the roles. So shall we go back to the Jamboard? What kind of active teaching methods could you use for each of these areas, the content areas that you can see on your screen now? So you can either pop your, yes, people are doing this already, thank you. Pop your sticky note, and also you can move it to where you want it. So which content area it would work in. So what could you do in relation to active teaching methods that would come under these content areas that would fit in? Stacey, have you got any sound yet, or we're still typing? Yes, she really does keep dropping in and out, obviously.
Dropping in and out there, yeah.
Oh, bless her, we've lost her again. So a visit, absolutely. And of course, there is more than one type of early years provision as well. So you could bring in different contexts there. Janet, I'm asking you that question.
Yeah, definitely. So I think,
Mhm.
you know, going on a visit, having a guest speaker, I think Stacey mentioned earlier, having some practical activities that are going on in the classroom, having a workshop, exploring different activities for different age groups, but doing that through a practical workshop. All of those sorts of things can really help to combine some of these through active teaching. I love the idea of workshops. And I don't know, I mean, I guess you're fitting this into timetables with GCSEs, of course. So it's difficult when you're not seeing, you know, students for a very long period of time, and then it might be a couple of days before you see them again. But I think that either sparking off an interest through a practical workshop or an activity or a guest speaker or a visit, and then consolidating that, you know, through that teaching and learning, or vice versa. Students love quizzes, don't they? Someone's just popped that on as well. So another good way to consolidate and to keep on that sort of reflecting and showing how all of these things overlap and combine.
Oh, I love that one about turning up to a lesson dressed inappropriately and ask students what was wrong. Love that.
They would love that too, would they not?
I remember having a discussion with an early years student about how appropriate nail extensions were in working in early years. Most upset that she had been told by, I think it was in some kind of job interview, that the nails that she had, and they were beautiful, but how appropriate they were for working in early years was under discussion.
Absolutely.
Yeah, plan a trip as well, like students planning the trip and then looking at legislation, policies and procedures. Excellent. And I guess that true false quiz, any quiz, the students creating it rather than the tutor. It's a case of there's a lot to do, but you can doubly assess someone's knowledge, can't you, if you get them to write the questions and not just answer them. So yeah, I've wonderful sessions where the students have written the questions for other students to answer. I actually saw that when I was part of an Ofsted inspection, where I was in a practical session in an FE college, where the vocational teacher got the students to write the questions. They didn't write them, and they were really able to doubly assess the depth and breadth of knowledge. Stacey's popped some ideas in as well. We've had nursery day, an opportunity to play with gloop, Play-Doh, paint, and thinking about the learning, adapting the session for children's needs and interests. Absolutely. Talk about my great nephew's love of dinosaurs regularly, don't I, Janet? So everything we do is based on dinosaurs when we're developing his skills and knowledge. So absolutely. Ask the safeguarding lead to talk to the students about legislation, policies and procedures. Absolutely. Anything else that's popping up on the sticky notes there or in the chat, Janet, that's resonating for yourself?
Well, there's some brilliant ideas. I want to come into your classrooms because these sound absolutely amazing. Yeah, we've just got some sort of peer observations going on as well from Stacey in the chat, which is good, and working together. We've got to, these pupils are 14, so they're on the beginning of that journey. They need something sometimes to motivate, to inspire. They're new to the world of early years and childcare. That's what this is all about, and giving them that taste. So I think you said, Helen, at the beginning, bringing things, making things come alive in that classroom are really good motivators, especially with some of those areas like legislation, policy and procedure. Some brilliant community activities, so really engaging with people in the community, looking at perhaps different approaches to the curriculum, thinking about learning outdoors, that sort of thing. There's some really good ideas. I'm motivated and inspired by looking at this. Your pupils are very lucky, I think.
Absolutely. We'll just pause on this for just another few seconds, just to make sure everybody has had the chance to participate. But like we said, these are your ideas now to keep and use in your planning. So wonderful. Thank you for your ideas so far. I absolutely want to work in early years. I'm just reading all of these, like, get me signed up for this course quick. Okay, so we're going to move on to sharing ideas and resources now. So we hope you found that activity useful. And as I say, keep popping things onto that Jamboard if you have an idea that you'd like to share. And leading on from that activity, it's going to be useful to share best practice, which is what we're doing now, such as resources and ideas that can really enhance effective practice both in and out of the classroom for your pupils. And we've got page 4 on the Jamboard next to let us know what resources you currently use or have within your centre, your school. How do you use them? Is there an opportunity outside this session to share the resources with each other as well? So a few examples are on there to get you started. Review an inspection report from an early years setting to give the learners a fuller understanding of Ofsted's role, and then use a flow chart or diagram to reinforce understanding of legislation, frameworks, policies and procedures. So what other ideas do you have in relation to resources? Janet, I know we've talked in the past about nursery view. Is that something you would recommend?
Yeah, there's some really good sort of virtual reality. Nursery View is a nice I'm going to say qualification. It's not a qualification, but it's a nice introduction to things that might be trickier to teach. It's looking at health and safety. It's looking at aspects of keeping yourself and keeping children safe. So it does so through that virtual reality type approach and sort of online virtual learning. So that's quite nice, and it's very student friendly, and the activities are pupil centered in terms of, simple wins, like there's some drag and drops, there's some things that might sort of lead to more deeper thinking and understanding, and those trickier areas of what would you do next. So nursery view is good, really helps again with those scenarios. And something that I think Stacey mentioned and other people mentioned about putting some units together, putting some content areas together rather for induction. It might be something that is a real gentle way into this particular vocational area as well. So yeah, you can find Nursery View on our website, I believe.
Yes, I've just typed nursery view into the chat just so people know how it's spelled. And can you please check that I've done it right, Janet?
Yeah, that's how it's spelled. Yeah.
Great. And Richard's just put an idea in about having a Facebook group or some other kind of group to pose questions. Feel free to do that yourself. We don't facilitate Facebook groups, but if it's something you as professionals want to set up, please feel free to.
Yeah, I know we've talked as well about communities of practice where resources and things could be shared, and I know that sort of aiming towards a September there with our alumni team, so watch out for that as well. But as Helen said, yeah, you could always do something in the interim, but we will be working towards that. I think our alumni team is certainly trying to get that community of practice up and running, I believe.
Yeah, and someone's suggested the Nursery World show, absolutely for pupils who can access that. Are there other shows across the country, Janet? Do we know? Does it?
Well,
do,
that's the main
Go on.
one, Helen, I would say. Sorry, that the Nursery World one is the main one for students, and there's lots of interactions that can happen. So if anyone's been to the Nursery World show in London, it's an annual event, and yeah, it's good because you're going to meet lots of professionals from sort of different walks and diverse areas within the sector. So that's always a good one. Journals and magazines and maybe writing articles for a journal or magazine, you know, in the classroom. I don't mean for real, but the pupils could have a go at doing something like that. Especially where they're trying to then demonstrate their knowledge and consolidation. So Nursery World and the magazine that goes with that, the journal, is very useful and very up to date.
Lovely, thank you so much. We'll just leave that Jamboard going again and move on because we've still got a few bits to get through. I'm going to skip past the next plan, do, review bit and look at the teaching and learning materials that NCFE provide to support this. So there are classroom packs containing ready-to-go teaching and learning materials with everything you would need to deliver the VCert effectively. However, remember they've been written for that generic learner, not necessarily yours. The classroom packs are in digital and editable formats, and they're going to be free to download. There will also be schemes of work which completely outline entire units of work based on 1 hour lessons for each content area. And the schemes of work will contain an additional level of detail to help you deliver your lesson and include suggested timings, lesson aims, learning outcomes, and suggested assessment activities. So that's formative assessment. You'll have complete PowerPoint presentations covering the teaching and learning content from the specification, and they include teaching and learning activities that you could use. And there will also be, there are also comprehensive workbooks to complement the scheme of work, which do contain classroom-based activities to recap and assess learning as you go. The workbook will also include independent study tasks that can be used as homework or flipped learning opportunities, whatever you decide is best for your pupils. And then the workbooks will also contain learning roundups, which will be short formative assessment for pupils to assess their knowledge using similar questions. For example, the multiple choice question, short answer question, and extended response question. They are similar to the ones used in the external assessment. So it gets the learners used to answering those types of questions. But like we said, with all resources, it's best to use them, but adjust them to suit your pupils and your teaching. And then the actual assessment material is a good way to make revision effective. As we've already mentioned, there are also sample assessment materials that are available for the EA and NEA for you to access on the NCFE website in the subject-specific VCert pages. So we're going to move on now to look at formative assessment in a bit more detail, but let's recap first of all to that quote I shared earlier from Dylan Williams to explore practice testing and how this links to formative assessment when you're going to be preparing your students for the EA and NEA. So in the context of your curriculum planning and design, mapping the core content, knowledge and understanding effectively, allowing that overlap and the naturally holistic links alongside carefully considered spaced practice and well-designed retrieval tasks and testing is an excellent formative assessment opportunity for you as a practitioner, whilst also helping you prepare your pupils for the summative assessment of the core exam papers. And research suggests that the practice testing at regular intervals can help prepare students for exams with reduced anxiety, as they are used to retrieving knowledge on a regular basis. And as I say, that Ofsted example I shared earlier, where the students were writing those questions, really helped build their confidence and knowledge in their ability to answer them. If they can write them, boy, can they answer them. And it was level 1 group that I saw this with, and obviously there was a buzz in the room when the teacher started setting this task. The learners were obviously very used to doing it, and it was really building their confidence in their ability to prepare for the summative assessment. We're going to look at formative assessment in a bit more detail now, because we've got that change now from the DFE and wanting them to be aligned to GCSEs, and that new model of terminal assessment. Formative assessment is ever more important part of the pupil learner journey to track the progress. It's important that there are a variety of formative assessment methods used, and they are contextualized and they take place on a regular basis. This helps pupils to identify their strengths and weaknesses and target the areas that they need to work on, as well as allowing teachers to frequently check the pupils' progress and the effectiveness, obviously, of their own teaching and learning practice. So it's also important to have both feedback, focus on past performance, and feed forward, focusing on the development in the future. So the feedback that we give students and pupils as teachers tells them how they've got on, how they've performed against a specific point. And then from that, the feed forward helps them to plan for their future and focus on what they need to develop further. So formative assessment helps the development of the wider skills, knowledge and competencies and learner confidence, and it will enhance their employability skills if you include those as well. To support you in your preparation for delivery in Year 10, we're going to spend the next part of this session looking at formative assessment in a bit more detail and how to explicitly plan for formative assessment methods and how important that is, vital if you like, for in the part of the learning journey. And I'm sure you're going to have a mountain of your own effective formative assessment strategies, but the PVD team can also help and support with formative assessment strategies and ideas to help you prepare your pupils for the summative assessments. We've got some examples that we're going to share now. What I'd like you to do is put any methods into the chat box that you currently use, and of course this list isn't exhaustive. If you've got any ones that you use, please share them. So on the screen now you can see that list of formative assessment methods. So which of them do you use? Why do you use them? Are there any that you don't use and think you might want to try some different ideas? Do you use that wide range of activities, or do your pupils get assessment fatigue? Thinking more broadly, could you develop your own practice to make things easier for you and better for your pupils? I know I've got my favourite methods as a teacher. Normally it's a card sorting activity, but I need to be mindful that my pupils are all different and they'll respond differently. So making things fun, diversifying the approaches and reviewing the impact and the success of my approach is really important. So I know we do rely on sort of mock assessment activities, but do our pupils get a bit fatigued by constant mocks? How can we make the assessment engaging, inclusive, meet the needs of the learners that we've been talking about? These, if you have any SEND learners or special considerations that would need to be taken into account. I know we've got people putting things into the chat now, so I'm going to pause a second and ask Janet to pull out some gems again.
You know, what I'm reflecting on is what we touched on earlier, and that was about that journey. And when you talked, Helen, about retrieval and the journey of that study experience that a student at Key Stage 4 is going to be on. And I think retrieval of information when you're studying for GCSE is highly pressurized. And I think it's that remembering new information and not really being able to apply it, not really being able to make sense of it yet because of the journey you're on. So anything that kind of explores concepts, new ideas, takes it out of retrieval and into some sort of application is really helpful and allows the student not only to progress in their understanding, but I think it can take pressure off as well. It's supporting that metacognition, isn't it? And it's supporting that learning journey. So I would say that formative assessments need to take into consideration how and at what stage the pupil is at with their retrieval processes, and how can we take some of that out of the pupil's head, all of that information that they're trying to remember all of the time, almost like a factual book of GCSE knowledge, and make it so that it's something that they appreciate and can apply that knowledge to, so that it's not something that is a constant, I need to remember this and I need to remember this. It is more of a, I know about this. Difficult, but I think that's the journey, and we're helping these pupils on that learning journey. So for me, I like lots of discussions, I like lots of questions, I like lots of group work. I'd be thinking about maybe having some topic tests, knowledge tests, those sorts of things that are going on, and I'd be trying to encourage some scenarios where they're able to use that saved up knowledge, if you like, and apply it in those situations.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just popped a link as well there into Puzzle Maker, because not just me using it as a teacher, but getting the students to create word searches, crossword puzzles, etc., just to help reinforce key terminology or key legislation, whatever it is. We have had an example of knock the teacher off the leaderboard, and I absolutely adore that. Competition between students and the teachers, great fun. And that was definitely something I saw in that Ofsted session that I keep talking about. So brilliant, thank you. Keep your ideas coming in there, but we will move on again. We've still got some content to get through. So talking about feedback, a powerful method that can address the majority of the EFL 5 strategies mentioned earlier is live marking. Live marking puts a greater emphasis on verbal dialogue that is scripted and targeted to help pupils improve their work. So this means that pupils can instantly act on the feedback, all the while significantly reducing written marking for the teacher. Live marking permits the teacher to give pupils concise, regular feedback that can be acted on immediately. And I'm aware that some of you may be governed by a marking policy and understand that for Ofsted purposes, progress is not evident in this situation. Yellow box marking can overcome this. Overcome this issue, as it is a more targeted approach to marking that ensures teachers and pupils focus on a specific area of the work rather than the entire piece. And that encourages teachers' feedback to be diagnostic and support improvement. The area of work is clearly marked, focusing on key marking points. A 2020 study found that pupils valued verbal feedback over written feedback, and it was stated that pupils who received verbal feedback perceived the feedback to be better in terms of quality, use, quantity and timing, and usefulness compared to pupils who received written feedback. And this can come from peer or self-feedback, and it makes the feedback instant, immediately actionable, and you get formative feedback as you will see if there are any common errors of content or anything you need to readdress. The final idea to consider regarding feedback is the idea of repeating content and the intervals between teaching and feedback activities. Linked to the idea of formative assessment, how do you know, but more importantly, how do your pupils know what they have retained, what new knowledge and understanding they have, and of course, how to retrieve it and use it in the subject area. So moving on to activity 4. Janet, I'm going to come to you to see if you think this is going to be worthwhile to do. We're going to share a number of formative assessment tasks that can be adapted across the qualification, which show how your pupils' current level of understanding of the content, where it's at, kind of thing. We'll talk about each task in more detail in the next few slides, but Janet, I kind of want you to help me pick out what's going to be most useful. So I'll
Okay.
whiz through the different methods here, and then I'll ask you to guide us as to which one is going to be the most useful. These are on the Jamboard pages 5 to 14. Moving on, we'll talk about the walkabout bingo first of all.
Okay.
So this example here has questions from content area 2. Pupils can only ask their peers one question each. They record their answer and move on. First person to have all their answers filled shouts bingo. The task encourages pupils to talk to one another, going beyond the typical think, pair and share, as they have to engage with different members of the class. It's very simple to create and very adaptable. It's on Jamboard page 5 and 6. I'm going to go on to the next one, which is about expanding and elaborating. Teachers can provide statements from any of the content areas or ask their learners to come up with the statements. And these ones are from content area 4 and 5. Having but, because and so allows the pupils to develop the statement in more detail, as well as develop the detail and complexity of it. These are on Jamboard pages 7 and 8. And you can also create and consider creating answers for the but, because and so. So that's the expand and elaborate one. The next one is the thinking and linking grid. The content area section of indicative content is chosen, and all the keywords or terminology associated with are placed in the spaces on the grid. And this example is from content area 3. So your pupils can then roll a dice, and the number that is rolled identifies the first word. Roll the dice a second time, and the number identifies the second keyword. Your pupils will then use each of the keywords to think and link together using the links made grid. The links can be verbal or written, and they can be used at any point in the lesson. For example, it can be a starter activity, a homework activity, and whatever you decide. And these are on Jamboard pages 9 to 12. And I think the last one, the fourth one, is the misconception retrieval. For this one, I've added some common misconceptions using content area 1, content areas 1 and 3. Your pupils will then try and provide a correct or better answer, and through their research will attempt to support their answer with some evidence. These are on Jamboard pages 13 and 14, and you can also consider having some examples of a correct or better answer. So Janet, now that I've done that whistle stop tour through those 4, where would you like to go with them all in Jamboard, please?
Oh, do you want me to choose a couple, do you, that we sort of play about with, or
whatever you think, and if people could tell us in the chat as well which they would like, I don't mind, whatever you think's best.
Well, people are liking them all, but the bingo was very popular because of that sort of helping with communication and sort of that interaction skills. I think you could, it depends really. I'd be combining all of these because they've all got some wonderful ideas. So the walkabout bingo seemed very popular, but not necessarily the most popular one amongst the pupils. But certainly you can see how that's going to help with that consolidation. I like the idea of the misconceptions and having, maybe having that as some sort of starter activity. I think these could be really good at the beginning of a lesson and at the end of a lesson, where you're, where the pupils are playing and exploring that new information that they've gained in that particular session around a particular group of content areas or a particular content area. And they're applying it, they're making sense of it, they're having a bit of fun with it, there's no sort of judgment on it, and I think it could keep that motivation. So I would see these for me as something that I might use all of them interchangeably at the beginning or at the end of lessons. So as far as
you can have some fun with them all. You can have some fun with them all, can't you? There's four really good ideas there.
Yeah, I like the misconception because I think you could bring out some card activities there, and you could have some really good discussions there. Because as the teacher, you could deliberately get it wrong and just say, "Well, how come? How come you don't agree with me?" It's like, "Whoa, you wouldn't do that, sir. You wouldn't do that, miss. You'd be looking at this." You get some real exploration and understanding of views, again in that non-judgmental way. So I like that for debate, discussion and consolidation, and thinking things through. Also when you're bringing in topics that may require a little bit more thinking, a little bit more reflection on a pupil's own viewpoints and things like that, where you might be questioning things, and that real change in behaviour is expected from that new learning. So the misconceptions can be really useful there as well.
Absolutely. I'm just chuckling to myself at it's fine.
I want to do them all, don't I? I'm really sorry.
You do. We do, yes. Richard's comment about the walkabout bingos, to just kind of force the students to interact. And yes, they might hate you for it, but they would get used to it. And when you think about you're developing the behaviours that they will need to have in the sector. So, only talking to your friends and only not engaging with a range of people, it's really important in childcare in early years to be able to do that. So possibly a torture experience at the start, but getting them used to doing it, and even creating their own walkabout bingos and taking charge of things. But because so, how else could that be used, Janet?
The walkabout bingo.
No, the but because so that's on the screen now.
Sorry, looking now. I'm still with the bingo. Expand and elaborate on the but because and so. I think I would combine this again. I'd be thinking about those misconceptions, and I'd be asking for sort of, okay, so why? Tell me more about this. Let's expand this conversation. I'd use it as a conversation or discussion, move forward, and you could almost have. Almost like I know they're not going to have buzzers, but if they had cards and they were able to actually move a discussion forward. So if you were having a discussion around a particular subject area, then they could be, okay, we're going to go for the but because so now, and they'd be ready for that. So again, at the end of a lesson or at the beginning of a lesson to recap the previous, especially, with the timetable that might be fragmented across a lot of several subject areas, then I think this would be to really gain more information and test the students' retrieval, if you like, and application of knowledge in the more trickier areas, or where somebody might have been missing for a lesson and you're bringing them back in and trying to bring them up to date. I think this could be a really good use of formative assessment that is retrieving information, recapping information, reflecting on it, and showing you as the teacher as well what are the students actually, what are the pupils retrieving, what are they remembering, what are they able to bring back into the lesson, and what do we need to do more of. So they can't expand and elaborate if they don't understand the subject area. So it will be a good one for sort of attaching to the beginning and end, and especially in discussions I'd be using that, I think.
Absolutely. Thank you, Janet. So we're nearing the end of today's session. I do want to leave a little bit of extra time at the end for anyone who has any questions. So we're going to move on to the resources and support that's available to you. You have got that plan to review form, remember. If you find it useful, please complete it, and it'll give you some focus on what to do after today's session and where to go next. So I'm going to start off resources and support with the NCFE website. On the VCert page, you'll find the information about why choose VCerts and the 14 to 16 schools brochure for vocational education and how to learn more about our VCert quals. And they could also be used as in option evenings in order to help learners make informed decisions about which qualification or qualifications to take, what the progression routes and career prospects are. And you'll also find the link to each subject-specific page, and this contains information such as the spec, the sample assessment materials, and the teaching materials. We also have our Parent, Supporter and Pupil VCert Information Hub, where the resources are aimed at helping parents and learners make informed decisions about VCerts, and this includes VCerts and, of course, subject guides. And on both pages, you can also use the Get in Touch function, where you can request more information on subjects you're interested in. And there's also the opportunity to tick the market and communications box, and that'll help you to receive updates on qualification events and news relevant to you via email, on the phone, or through the social channels that we have. Let's quickly look at the subject-specific pages. We've integrated QualHub into ncfe.org.uk, so it's all one place now for everything. It'll be ncfe.org.uk will be where you can search for all our quals, access the spec, the assessments, the teaching materials, the regulations and course file documents, and so much more. And like I said, you can use our search our qualifications function by adding your subject area or qual code or you can select the VCerts in the features box, and you should always ensure you're on the correct page by checking the qualification accreditation number or the QAN. So this is the page for child development and care in the early years. If you scroll down this page, you'll see some brief information about the qualification, including career opportunities and performance table details. If you scroll down further, you'll then see the support materials tab, where you'll find the qualification spec and the synoptic connections document. And in the assessment materials tab, you'll find the sample assessment materials that are available for the NEA and EA. And then lastly, the teaching materials will also be available to download here too. And if you don't have a login, you would normally go to your exams officer to get that. And you can also refer to the portal user guide on the website for further support. That's a lot of information, but we also have on-demand webinars. There's a VCert playlist on our YouTube channel, and there are numerous webinars, CBD sessions and training events, which you can access on demand. The subject discovery webinar is also available here, which will give you a deep dive into the structure and the content of the new VCert qual. And in this playlist, you can also access on demand the Technical Award Introduction webinar. The next bit I'm going to is the provider development team. That's us. When you register your pupils or are approved to deliver the qual, you will be contacted by the provider development team as part of the onboarding process. This service is tailored to the individual needs of your centre to ensure that your requirements are met. The PVD team supports staff to ensure you're prepared to teach the qualification and are clear on the requirements for delivery and assessment of it. There are regular CPD sessions throughout the year, especially around those key assessment times. So make sure you're on track. Make sure you're on track and feeling confident. And we also provide the following services. We have tutored videos on supporting pupils, guidance on key updates of subject content, mapping documents, monthly webinars, intervention support tools, delivery training sessions, and tailored workshops. Other support is also available through our wonderful customer support team, who can help and support with first line inquiries, registration queries and bookings on the portal. You can also email vcerts@ncfe.org.uk with any questions that are specifically related to the new VCert qualifications. So next steps and questions. We do have that reflections section in the workbook. We are coming to the end of the session, so this is your opportunity to take a bit of time to reflect on everything we've talked about. You can go back to your plan, do, review in your workbook. You could complete the what you've learnt section of the KWL activity, highlight a few key points that you've learned that you really want to retain and remember, but also look back at your want to learn. Did we cover all the bits that you wanted to learn about? You can have a minute or two to finish that, or you can do it later after the session. So the Jamboard page on 15 is near the end of it. And what are your key takeaways? What will you do next? What impact might this have? And how will this benefit or impact on your pupils? So you've got blank covers, blank versions of all of those assessment activities and feedback resources that we shared. But take just a minute now to, what are your key answer these questions that are on the screen now using those post-it notes. What are your key takeaways? What will you do next? What impact might or will this have? And how will this benefit or impact on your learners? We'll see if Stacey can join in audio or not. Janet, what are your key takeaways from today?
I think for me, it's remembering that this is a relatively new approach to the qualification, to having confidence in your delivery, to thinking holistically, to using some of those innovative approaches to the teaching and learning, and remembering that the journey will be different for each and every individual pupil that you have on board. So there's a challenge, isn't there, as with any teaching and learning environment, but to have the confidence to approach things holistically would probably be one of my key takeaways, and to really keep that motivation going with some of those innovative starter and finisher activities. I think that would be mine, I think, Helen.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, qualification assessment methods are never set in stone. They will always change and move. And as teachers, I think we are very used to moving and adapting as we go. It's a case of, I think it's having that positive attitude, isn't it, towards what's happening. I think pupils do breed on teachers' enthusiasm levels. You know, it is. You can share your enthusiasm for something just as you can share your negativity for something. So I think my most important thing would be stay positive, Pygmalion approach kind of thing. Your pupils can do this. Expectations that they can, you know, do kind of get shared amongst your learners, don't they? So if you have confidence in them, they'll have greater confidence in themselves. So I think that would be my oh, poor Stacey's having a tech issues.
Not having a good afternoon, are you, Stacey?
She is reinforcing that a community of practice would be really beneficial. And thinking about the engagement today, the value of networking and communicating with each other is really important. So absolutely, Stacey, I'll go along with that big time. Anything on the reflections side of things here that you can pull out at all, Janet?
I'm just looking through this, reviewing schemes of work. Yeah, absolutely. So thinking, I guess, about those, how those content areas can overlap.
Yeah.
Interesting ideas. Yeah, sort of everybody really has been able to see how things can be adapted. Sorry, I'm reading and thinking at the same time.
Yes.
Not multi-skilling very well. It's quite small as well on my screen, so bear with. Sorry. I do think that the key takeaways really are just about reflecting. Thank you, whoever did that.
Yeah.
So reflecting on where we're up to, and reflecting on those schemes of work and approaches, and using some of the ideas that together as a community you've come up with here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, really good.
I'm going to ask Beth to launch the next poll as well, just to see. People are saying that they're more, they feel more confident and more prepared, but we're going back to that poll that we did at the start, asking how confident you feel now. So thinking about where you were at the beginning, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 was low, 10 was high, it still is that. Please let us know how you feel now on a scale of 1 to 10. So it's anonymous. Please pop your vote in. And let us know where you're at, please. Oh, and straight away we've got people at the top end of the scale, so that's good. I mean, there is a lot of support. It's just a case of feeling confident that yes, it's a new qualification, but that teaching and learning is still teaching and learning. And like someone said earlier as well, the content areas are not that dissimilar to the old. So brilliant. People are saying that they're feeling more confident. So thank you so much for that. We've got 100%, it's 7 or above. So that is just wonderful, because we started off with some people at 1 to 2. So thank you for your time today. If you have any questions, please pop them in the chat. If you've got anything that you wanted to learn that haven't had the opportunity to, please put them in. We're going to stop the recording.